Who of you actually feels the esports hype? Great. Now, calm down, because hype can be difficult and can actually also harm what we're trying to achieve in esports. And I'm going to talk about why you should care, but also what you should not do. First of all, everybody knows, and these are the numbers from our dear friends at Newzoo, everybody knows there's going to be a lot of money in esports. There is already money in esports, but that money will grow to an extent that we don't even know about yet. If you compare esports to like more traditional sports, you'll figure that we're not even able to monetize in a similar degree that all the other sports do. Meaning we make less money per fan, per enthusiast than most of the other sports. And by most of the other sports, I mean like basketball, football, soccer, and those type of sports. Our audience, though, is growing. It's not a declining audience. It's an audience that is growing organically and naturally because the so-called millennials are actually the ones that, that grow up with gaming, that grow up with esports, and the way esports is being presented and being organized. So that's the good news. Now, talking about sports, I doubt that any of you here in the room ever witnessed the birth of a new sport, because sport, or most of the popular sports, have been around for ages, for almost forever, hundreds of years. Esports is like quite the opposite. Esports has started like 15, 20 years ago, and very, very casually and only within certain communities and smaller groups. There was no distribution. There was no way actually to bring esports to the masses. Now, this is really the first time that this generation or many generations can witness that there's something new at the horizon. And I think looking back in 10, maybe 15 years from now, this will all going to be very normal for us. But right now, this is something so big and something so amazing that is going to happen that actually you should be hyped. Now, a little bit about ESL. So for those of you who don't know ESL, we are like a world-leading operator of tournaments and leagues, headquartered actually in Germany, but represented all across the world in, I believe it's 11 countries now with 550 to 600 people. And we operate leagues and tournaments. We also take care of teams and player relationships. We're engaged with various associations, including the VESA or integrity organizations, or the German Esports BIU, which is an industry organization. We certainly work a lot with sponsors and big partners. That includes companies like Intel, for example. We do distribute our content, our productions at the big live events, but also the small studio, broadcasting studio events through our partners like Twitch, YouTube, Azubu, Facebook as well. And the part I'm going to talk about today is how we work with game developers and publishers, and that's why you are here. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our experience, why and how you should be looking into esports games. Why should you care? First of all, esports is not making you money per se. What does that mean? You should not be in esports for making money. You should be in esports for making sure that your game has an enhanced and extended user retention, and also to extend the life cycle of your game. It's basically a tool that helps you manage your audience and extend the way you present and deal with your game. Everybody, or like many developers, come to us and say, hey, we want to develop the next big esports game. And usually our response is, no, you don't. You don't choose esports because esports chooses you. There's just no way you can enforce esports into the community. Even when you know all the things that it takes to develop that game and all the things that it takes to actually run that game as a sport, it's still the consumer, the audience, that will decide whether your game will become an esports. And it's a long road, actually, to esports. So we always tell developers they should not develop for esports, but they should have esports in mind. And they should not jump into esports unprepared. Meaning, you should have people in your team that are actually deeply engaged in playing competitive multiplayer games. You should also make sure that when you start talking to your audience, you don't mention esports. Just let it happen. Be prepared for esports, and I'm going to talk about the features in a few slides. And grow your audience. Grow your audience organically. So if you develop a game that works, that has a functional business model, then it's actually possible to work from there and engage your audience, your players, in a way that they will play more seriously. They will play more competitively, and also they will start spectating. You will soon figure out that they will actually demand those esports features that you need to become a more serious sport. Be patient is also a very important advice. It'll not happen overnight. So it can take like 2 years from the launch of your game to actually be relevant in esports. And this also indicates why you should actually have a viable business model in place, because most developers, especially the small developers, would be broke until actually the game gains traction in esports. And there's only few exceptions where you can say that a developer/publisher intentionally managed to develop a game for esports and be successful in esports. And let's take Overwatch as one of those few exceptions. The reason being, their development team, their whole publishing team, their community team, they were knowing 100% what they were doing. They had this track record of developing esports games and being successful in esports before. And even that is not a guarantee to be successful. Now, they did a great job, and they managed to get very quickly to this high stage. But for most of the rest of the developers and publishers, it's going to be the opposite. And that's why you have to be patient, and don't expect, if any marketing or business people come to your room, don't expect, and they ask you, hey, so are we ready? Shall we invest our 1.5 million marketing budget now? Don't do it. Develop over time and try to find an evolution. But don't let yourself be stressed into this esports hype. And finally, do something different. There's many competitive games out there, and find your own angle, find your own approach into making things different. A good example is Rocket League. Something like Rocket League did not exist that way before. Now they took two different angles, like the football type of game and a card type of game, and combined that into a very fun experience. Find your own Rocket League, do something different. Don't try to copy League of Legends, Counter-Strike, and those type of games. And this is even more so true for the aspiring esports on mobile, which is not a developed market yet, which in fact doesn't even exist at this point in time. But if you want to be successful in the future, do something different. You won't be successful just by trying to take your Counter-Strike clone to a mobile device. That's not enough. Very quickly on what an esports game actually consists of, and most of you are probably aware of that. most of the successful esports games are synchronous player versus player games. Obviously, they are online. There's also a few exceptions every now and then, but don't take those exceptions as a rule. The clear skill curve is super important, and the sentence "easy to learn, hard to master" has been used so many years in esports, but it's still true. It's really like you need to engage your players initially. You need to give them instant success and get them entrenched instantly, and then need to build that skill curve over time, because you have to distinguish the average player from the amateur player, from the semi-professional to the pro gamer, as that will make the big difference both in playing the game competitively and also in spectating the game. So it's certainly much more fun and entertaining to watch people play your game that are playing in a very professional and neat way. Free-to-play is an interesting discussion. So most esports games are actually free-to-play, but then again, there are exceptions, and you have to find your own way of, building your business model for your game. And certainly, it will reflect your budgets, your money, your financial situation. If you can't afford to wait 2 years for your revenues, you may have to charge your $20 or 20 euros as a premium charge for your game. So it's both. It's your game. It needs to reflect the way your game functions as a competitive game, but also your financial situation, of course. Few core features, and actually more details will be available in the final presentation that will be put online about what you need to take into consideration. There's a few basic, very obvious things that you need to look into. That's a matchmaking, a skill-based matchmaking that will help you find the right people, play together, and play against other people. There's nothing worse than playing with the wrong people because it can ruin your whole gaming experience. And matchmaking is something you should think of right in the beginning of your game development and design process. It's really, really important, and don't think that you can add it into the game later on. You may be able to start with a very basic matchmaking that doesn't really take the skill too much into consideration, but you have to be able to scale it up and become more professional when matchmaking your players. Custom lobbies, also very obvious. People that want to play together want to choose who they play with, and want also at one point to create their own teams and their own groups that they want to play with. So very often games that don't have custom lobbies, the players are forced to build their own solutions. And this can actually halt and slow down the process of being successful in that space. You don't have to have everything in place straight from the beginning, but you need to be prepared, and need to be ready to scale up those functions. Anti-cheat may not sound like that's important in the beginning, but in fact, as soon as people start playing your game seriously and become very engaged and start playing those cups and tournaments, they will also try to start cheating. And at that point, this can ruin the matches with other players. And it's a very toxic thing to happen to your community, that even people just start talking about it and start thinking that some of the players they played with are cheating. So you need to find a technical solution for that, but you need to work on this with your community management and your community. We have, I think, 5 minutes. So the timeline can be a very long one and does vary from game to game. But very generally speaking, in the beginning, you usually start playing with friends and family. You have this very close group of people that get engaged in kind of play testing your game and starting to play your game. So this is the time where you can still make those smart choices in making design tweaks and adjusting your game to the people's needs. So you need to listen very carefully. And actually, very important also, you don't need to have everything in place in the beginning. Because if you focus on the basics and the most important features, this gives you so much more possibility to perfectionize what you actually do. Let's say you have a certain game modes, or you plan for certain game modes, like arena game modes, or special things that your game designers have come up in the design process of your game. Don't try to implement all of them straight from the beginning. Start with what you believe is most important, and listen to the players' feedback and what they actually think about it. And you may hear feedback that will help you designing those other game modes that you're looking into. At one point, and especially when you go beta, player liquidity will become really important. So you always need enough players in the game, so people have people to play against or with. They will also need to be on similar skill levels at one point. That's where the matchmaking comes in again. But you need to feed this funnel of players all the time, and you can adjust the skill side of it or readjust it over time as you have more players. But in the beginning, it's just important that you have as many players in the game as somehow possible. And try to identify from your community people that will become influencers, that will speak for you and for your game. And some of them may become moderators at one point, or even commentators. Think about if your game one day becomes like a streaming game and you start streaming on Twitch and co., you will need commentators, you will need experts. Try to grow them organically from within your community. And the early adopters, the early players that you have, you will very often find people that come out of the dark and do their own YouTube videos, Let's Plays, and so on. And then you contact them, try to work with them, try to integrate them into the stuff that you do. They will be very happy and very pleased, and it's very rewarding for you, because that's the most natural way you can use the community and be part of the community. Last but not least, you will have to add more regular content. You will have to add more updates. You will have to rebalance, readjust as your community grows, as your players become more serious about the game. So let's say you start doing cups or tournaments and you start giving away prize money. I don't know, $200, $500 a weekend. Then you also have to become more serious about how you organize this, about how you engage with the audience, because suddenly it's about rewards and about money. That's where you have all kinds of disturbing behavior coming in as well. This though is like probably one of the most exciting stages that you're going to face in your game development, because then suddenly you see so much happening, and it's like for everyone really, really exciting to watch those things happening. So I was on time, and now we're open for Q&A.
Hi, thank you for your insights. You mentioned free-to-play as business model of choice, or the business model that is most often used. What's your opinion on selling performance items in this context?
I don't consider selling performance items being useful for esports. So anything that helps identifying players, that helps players, to distinguish themselves, that may accelerate certain things is fine, but you cannot, give people a competitive advantage by selling items. That won't work, and it does work in games in general, or for some people, and in some countries or some regions, that's actually a very common thing. But very generally in esports, I would totally not do that.
So it's an absolute no-go?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, great talk.
Thanks.
I'm wondering how you see the role of virtual reality in the future of competitive gaming and esports.
Yes. So VR and AR to us right now is a production and broadcasting tool. We have started working with partners delivering VR streams. So you can, if you take Counter-Strike as an example, you have different layers that you can dive into the game, and in your VR stream, you're actually part, or you have your own camera angle and your own view, and you can be, like more entrenched in the game. So that's a very, very important thing that is going to happen. Is media production side of esports. On the game side, I think we're still years away to see real esports happen. We're looking forward to seeing the first competitive games that will, actually be successful, provided there's the installed hardware base out there. But I think before we see like real VR games, maybe 2 years here in Berlin at Casual Connect, I can give you an answer. But I don't see it happen anytime soon. It's a big opportunity though. But like very generally in the games industry, everybody is also hyped not only on esports, also hyped on VR. But we need to have the installed base, we need to have the players, and we need also to find probably different game concepts or gaming concepts, because some of the League of Legends or Counter-Strike matches, they take forever, and I think we don't want to risk people falling from their chairs because they've been playing a hardcore game for 2.5 hours without a break. So we mainly also need to adjust the game. A VR game actually works in esports, maybe shorter matches and different games.
Great, thank you.
If there's no other questions for Arne, thank you very much for the informative presentation.
My pleasure, thank you.